Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Pankos, and I am here to talk about building an experimentation culture when an A/B testing platform is not enough. So before we dive in, it's a little bit about me. I've been at two companies that were in very different stages of their experimentation journey. When I joined Airbnb, they had already invested pretty heavily in the internal platform, even had some employees supporting it. And the processes and ways of working around A/B testing were very robust. So most of the teams were using A/B testing to drive decision making. Basically, my time there was falling in love with A/B testing, being like, this is awesome. So then I went to Strava, who also had invested in their own platform, but were a little bit earlier on in the journey. So there, it was thinking about what functionality is really going to drive forward the culture here, or perhaps it's education or processes, or maybe it's just a cheerleader. This is all to say that I am really, really excited to be here to talk to you about this. So today we're going to cover three topics. The first is why experimentation is important. If you work on an experimentation platform, I don't need to tell you why it's important, right? But it's good to level set on why we're even talking about this in the first place. And also, if you are in a place where you need to advocate for experimentation at your company, hopefully give you an idea about how to do so. Then we'll talk about a healthy experimentation culture. How do you know if your company is in a good place or if there's improvements that could be made? And then finally, what are some common blockers to reaching that culture? And my goal is by the end of this time that if you are in a place where your experimentation culture could be a little bit further along, you have some ideas about how to move in that direction. So let's dive in. Why is experimentation important? Let's say that you or someone else in your company, a team perhaps, has 20 product ideas. These are really solid ideas, and we're all excited about each and every one. How many do we think are actually going to work? How many are going to have that positive impact that they were intended to have? 4. The answer is about 4 will actually work. Depending on who you ask or the nature of the organization, anywhere from 10 to 33% of product changes actually result in a positive impact that they were intended to have. Further, some of the things that don't work end up hurting the business. And without A/B testing, there'd be no way to know this. This is why experimentation is so important, is how you make sure the changes that you're making to the product are good ones. But reaching the full potential of A/B testing requires more than just a platform. It's necessary, but not sufficient. That's why we're here, right? It requires a healthy experimentation culture. So what exactly do I mean by a healthy experimentation culture? How do you know if your company is in one or not? So here are some signs that the company is a healthy experimentation culture. Let's say there's a product team and they have some ideas. Again, these are really solid ideas, reason to believe that they'll succeed. In a healthy experimentation culture, these product changes are A/B tested. That might seem obvious, but it's not guaranteed, right? Just because a platform exists does not mean it's going to be used to drive decision making. Further, in a healthy experimentation culture, tests are high quality. What I mean by that is not only is the idea itself high quality, but when you see the results at the end, you can take them at face value. Believe that there's no hidden gotcha underneath. There's some issue and you can't really interpret the results as they show up. This is really important. Further, in a healthy experimentation culture, the teams engage with the results. So not only the product manager and the data scientists, but the engineers, the designers are really excited to see what happened to this idea that they had. What worked, what didn't. Both of them have learnings and really think about it. And the team is really engaged and excited and constantly thinking about how we can leverage what we learned in the past and bring it forward. In a healthy experimentation culture, A/B test results are used to understand what's going on with the whole business, understanding the business KPI or key performance indicator movements. So this is our HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, in case you weren't familiar. So in a healthy experimentation culture, when trying to understand, like perhaps at the company level dashboard, what's going on, A/B tests are used to separate the understanding of what happened because of what our teams did versus what happened due to external factors that are out of our control. And this is really critical and a signal that there's a healthy experimentation culture. Finally, learnings reach beyond that product team to the entire company and decision makers across the company. That way, two teams who might be in different parts of the organizations can learn from each other, not reinventing the wheel, not trying things that they could have just realized weren't going to work from the beginning because of what another team had tried. And then the company as a whole can constantly be moving forward in a productive direction and not wasting time. So this is what a healthy experimentation culture looks like above the surface, a beautiful plant. But beneath the surface, there's a lot of different pieces that need to go into feeding this. I call it platform. This is PlatformCon. Critical, right? Necessary, but not sufficient. There's some other pieces that need to be in place as well, and this is where the blockers lie. So let's talk about some common blockers and hopefully give you ideas about what you can do to overcome them if that's what you're facing. It comes down to, in a healthy experimentation culture, the benefits far outweigh the costs. There is no question whether a change should be A/B tested or not because it's just so worth it. Costs, we'll start here. This is where the platform is really helpful. It reduces the costs, which typically are either engineering and data science time to set up a test and analyze it, or slowing down the production lifecycle by having to squish an A/B test in there. So platform can really help reduce both of these, but not to zero. It's not going to be exactly to zero. And even if it was really close, there's still no reason necessarily to do it without any benefits. So what are these benefits? Going back to what we just talked about in a healthy culture and why A/B testing is so important, connecting the test results to the business is a major benefit of A/B testing. This is why we do it. We want to understand, are these changes good? How do they impact the business? But to do this, you need the right metric. The right metric for an A/B test is critical. So ideally in an A/B test, right, there is one metric, and that is the one that is making the decision, depending on what happens to it, to ship or not. Is it statistically significant up? Launch. Is it not? We don't, right? So picking that metric is really important. And there's a couple considerations that need to go into this to what I mean by right. The first is the time lag to observe the metric is small. So that way, when you make a change, you don't have to add a bunch of time to see what happened. I'm fine adding 4 weeks to every A/B test, says no product manager ever, right? Part of the reason for a platform is to reduce the time it takes to get to the results when you have an idea. It's really important to be able to move fast and be lean. So you don't want to wait too long to see what's going on. In addition, the metric is close to the changes being made. So let's say you're making a product change in the sign-up flow, and the metric that you want to observe is something down the line, like conversions or purchase. The more action someone is taking, whether it's external to your platform or to your company's product, such as a dog barks, a text message, someone, oh, I lost my wallet, I can't figure out how to pay for this. Those are all distractions that add noise, or different steps that they need to take within the app to get to that action also adds noise. And the more things that happen between the change and the metric itself, the harder it is going to be able to detect a change if it exists. In addition, it's all about detecting a change when it's there. That's the important part. The variance of the metric needs to be as small as possible. There's this trade-off with A/B testing that you might be familiar with. For the smaller the change we want to be able to detect, the more people we need, right? So maybe we run something for a long time if we want to see a small change. But if we're really swinging for the fences and only care about big changes, we can get away with a smaller sample size, as you might have heard. But what we don't usually talk about is that there's also a piece of that of the metric itself. If the variance of the metric is really big, then you need more users to detect the same change. So if you have a metric that's a conversion, meaning it's a 0 or 1, someone took an action or not, the closer that overall population rate is to 0.5, the better off you'll be. And then you won't have to wait 6 months to be able to detect a meaningful change, for example, which could happen if you have a really low conversion rate like 0.01. So variance of the metric is something to consider as well. And finally, the metric should be closely related to the key performance indicator, right? Because the goal is to be able to understand what's happening on the business. In an ideal world, you could just A/B test against that key KPI directly. But as we just mentioned, there's 3 other points to be considered, and this is often not feasible. You don't want to wait for weeks to see if there was a revenue impact, for example. Next best is a causal indicator. So when you see that metric go up in the A/B test, you can pretty confidently say that that KPI will go up as well, and by roughly how much. Would be great, but it often takes a while to establish because you need to establish that causality, which requires a bunch of other A/B tests. And I won't go, this could be a whole nother talk, so just reach out if you want to hear more about it. But usually what you start with is a correlated observation. So you just know that if this metric goes up, the KPI tends to go up as well. We've seen that offline. So we're going to just measure this one that's more feasible and trust for now that it is important for the KPI and work towards moving towards causality. Okay, the right metric, really important. Here's 4 things to consider when trying to come up with it. Great. So we've got a really big benefit here, going strong. There's another benefit to A/B testing too, right? Learnings. Learnings need to make it to decision makers throughout the company, right? So that everyone is building off of some shared knowledge. To make sure that learnings reach the decision makers, it's about finding the method that works best for your company. So it might be a spotlight all hands or an email digest, newsletter style. These are pretty easy to set up in Google Groups that just you can sign up for, and it sends with a TLDR of this is what happened, this is the change that we're making, and here's some more details. Maybe a Slack channel is more your vibe, or maybe there's a way to build it into the platform itself. Figuring out balancing the making sure people making decisions have the information against not inundating people with too much, right? Because then they won't get anything. Yay, look at this. Happy, balanced, healthy experimentation culture, strong benefits, low costs. Done, right? Not quite. There's one thing that can really tip the scale, and saving the best for last. Trust. And by trust, I mean when you see the results, you can trust that they are accurate. There's no issues. Trust degrades the benefits and completely tips the scale towards costs. Systematic errors are what will degrade trust. They usually fall into 2 categories. One around setup. For example, the treatment itself might not be delivered, then you have an AA test. Oops. Or traffic imbalance, and this is a nasty one. There is something in setup that made group A and group B not actually the same population. So when you're looking at the results, you can't tell if the change is because this is apples and this is oranges, or because of the change itself. So that's not great. Interpretation can also be a source of errors. If you have a data scientist running a Python script or multiple data scientists running multiple Python scripts, it introduces the possibility of errors. Or, this is a big one too, the underlying data is bad. If this is the case, again, this could be a whole nother talk. No platform is going to necessarily solve it, and you need to go address that issue directly. Great. So platform is how you can help regain trust. It automates the analysis, right? So it takes out the possibility of error there, can help reduce errors at setup, and also surface when there's an error early on, so that can be fixed quickly and time's not wasted. So in conclusion, a healthy experimentation culture looks like product changes are A/B tested, teams and leaders engage with the results are used to understand how the business is doing, and learnings reach decision makers across the company. We talked about, just very briefly, some possible blockers and solutions. A platform being a big one saves time, helps speeds up the production development lifecycle, and also can reduce errors and maintain that critical trust. Plus, picking the right metric to set yourself up for success and being able to detect meaningful changes, as well as a way to share learnings across the company, can really help make sure that the benefits are in place as well. So that is all I have for today. Thank you for sticking with me. If you have questions or feedback, please reach out. I'd love to hear with you. And thanks for listening.